Senate will come to order. Senate will be in their seats. Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Argabright. Billinger. Blasey. Blue. Bowers. Bowser. Claystrom Celine. Claystrom Sedgwick. Clifford. Corson. Dietrich. Erickson. Fagg. Fascudo. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Holscher. Klemp. Cluse. Masterson. Murphy. Owens. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Rose. Reichman. Schmidt. Schallenberger. Shane. Starnes. Sykes. Thomas. Thompson. Titus. Tyson. Ware. Warren.
Senators and guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to our guest chaplain, Doug Hinkle.
Let us pray. Gracious Father, I thank you for the sunshine this afternoon and the persistence of the coming spring, despite the winter weather overnight and the blustery day. Your word tells us that your plans are to prosper us, to give us a future and a hope. Father, I thank you for the hope we have in Jesus. Thank you for the promise of your gracious goodness and the assurance that your heart is always good toward us. Fill the Kansas Senate with your peace and your insight. As many of us observe Ash Wednesday, preparing our hearts and minds for the joyous celebration of Easter Sunday, we are reminded of your calling to repent, to change our thinking, to have the mind of Christ. Give this body your mind, your wisdom, as the critical issues of the day are debated. Cause each senator to argue strongly held, often differing positions in a gracious and honorable way, ultimately bringing about a resolution honoring you and blessing all Kansans. I pray for President Masterson, Vice President Schallenberger, Majority Leader Blasey, and Minority Leader Sykes, the committee chairs and ranking minorities, and each senator. Bless them with your wisdom and your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On a point of personal privilege, Chair recognizes the Senator from Cloud, Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Braving the strong Kansas wind today, I have with us in the West Gallery over my right shoulder, 2025 Russell County Leadership Group. So if we can say hello to them and welcome to Topeka. Thank you, guys.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, colleagues, it is my privilege to introduce a group of students from the Olathe Advanced Technical Center. This year, OATC is celebrating its 10th anniversary of supporting students with career and technical education, preparing them for the workforce, secondary education, and the military. So under the direction of Dr. Chris Berggren, these students are dedicated to advancing career training in culinary arts, welding, automotive technology, animal sciences, construction trades, health sciences, emergency medical services, and aviation electronics. Their hard work has resulted in incredible accomplishments this year. Over 10,000 internship hours logged across 52 business partners, with 87% of seniors engaged in real-world experience. 524 college credit hours, and 414 industry certifications just in the fall semester of 2024. 7 students were named Kansas CTE Scholars. Competitions at Skills USA, HOSA, and Pro Start competitions with multiple state champions and even a second place national winner in electronics. So colleagues, would you please, if you all would stand and be recognized by my colleagues on the Senate floor, colleagues, if you'll join me in welcoming the OATC.
Senator Johnson, Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today is Advocacy Day on the Capitol. Students are coming to find out how a bill passes, how a bill becomes a law. And I had the pleasure of meeting some young women from Eudora High School. As I call your name, would you please stand? Amelia Wayne, McKenna Rosti, and Ava Heron. And also with them is their teacher, Alex Mindel, who's the DCCCA teacher. Thank you for being with us today, and the Senate is going to give you a round of applause.
Welcome to the Kansas Senate. All right, on pages, we have Senator from Lyon, Senator Argabright.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor to introduce 4 young ladies from Hartford High School Jaguars, and they got to get back for basketball practice. Kylie Finnerty, if you'd stand up, Lexi Mears, Lila Wilkinson, and Trinity Wendell. Thank you for your help today. Welcome to the Senate.
Senator from Shawnee, Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I've got 4 pages today. They're coming to us from Auburn-Washburn School District, 6th graders at Auburn Elementary and Jay Scheidler Elementary. So I have Kai Scott, hi Kai, Grayson Lazi, Quaid Carr, and Rashik Sinha. Welcome, hope you had a great day.
Senator from Barton, Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to say thank you to everybody for the get well. I found out that my husband's more of a baby than my own kid when getting sick. But I want to introduce my pages from Hoisington. I have Sophia and Mila. So Sophia was my page in the House, and so it's great to have her back over here on the Senate side and have her sister with her. Thank you.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored today to have a page from Winfield Middle School, Elizabeth Lottie. If you stand up, thank you for being here today.
All right, thank you for helping us out today. All right, please note references of bills on page 1 and 2 of the calendar. Messages from the House. Clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bill 2331 and 2372, House Bill 2331, an act concerning coroners, and House Bill 2372, an act concerning state memorials.
Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
For the motion, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Chair appoints the Senator from Montgomery, Senator Peck, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The Senate, having resolved itself to Committee of the Whole, will now consider those items listed on the calendar under the heading of General Orders. We will turn our attention at this time to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611. The Chair recognizes Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson, to explain the resolution and adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Senator, you may continue.
Thank you very much. Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611 is a proposition to amend Article 3 of the Kansas Constitution, which would provide for the direct election of the Supreme Court justices and strike the nominating commission as we have it right now. This would return us to the way we selected Supreme Court justices prior to 1958, for the approximately 100 years prior to that. What it does basically is changes the language in Section 5, and I'll read it directly. It will read, "The citizens of Kansas who are qualified electors shall elect the justices of the Supreme Court." Very simple. "The rules applicable for elections and the designation of the position numbers shall be provided by law." Now, that law currently does not exist yet. It won't be formulated, obviously, until we adopt this. And then it says, "Justice positions 1, 2, and 3 shall be elected at the general election in November of 2028. Justice positions 4 and 5 in November of 2030, and Justice positions 6 and 7 in November of 2032, and every 6 years thereafter, respectively. Any vacancy occurring on the Supreme Court for an unexpired term shall be filled by election as provided by law." Now, again, you see a lot of stricken language. That deals with the nominating commission. And then we jump down to the next amendment in Section 8 of Article 3, which removes a prohibition of political activity by justices. So this basically allows them to participate in the political process. And the Section 2 is the explanatory statement that will show up on the ballot. And it's essentially the same language as we have in the amendment itself. It has one minor change, saying this amendment gives the voters the right to elect justices of the Kansas Supreme Court, and then provides any vacancy on the court for an unexpired term shall be filled at an election as provided by law. The only other amendment in this would change, if adopted, would change the date of the ballot, or the ballot question for the voters of all Kansas to decide, to August 4th, 2026, in a special election on that particular date. Kansas, as I said, elected their Supreme Court justices prior to 1958. There are 22 other states that elect their Supreme Court justices. Most of those states, I had research take a look at this, have had that way of selecting the Supreme Court intact, many cases since the 1800s. The most recent was Arkansas, which adopted nonpartisan elections for the state Supreme Court in the year 2000. So that's been in place now for 25 years. There are 13 states that have what we have currently, which is what they call the Missouri model. However, we have the most unique and odd system in that our nominating commission is has 9 members, 5 of which are attorneys. The chairman is an attorney, and then there are 4 members that are non-attorneys. They're represented by each congressional district, 2 members from each congressional district. What we would do by reverting to an election system for the Supreme Court would take care of a lot of different problems. The problem that we have right now is Kansas has the most overturned Supreme Court in the nation. Since 2007, over 87% of the decisions they've made that have advanced to the U.S. Supreme Court have been overturned. That fact alone should be disturbing and concerning. And in fact, the Supreme Court admonished the U.S. Supreme Court, criticized the Kansas Supreme Court for its poor decision-making. So something is wrong with the system we have. And this proposal would turn the decision back to the people of Kansas. And all we're doing with this concurrent resolution is giving the people of Kansas the chance to weigh in on whether this is how we want to do it, or do we want to continue with the current system. I could go on and on. There's an awful lot of data here, and I would certainly stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
Are there questions for the senator from Johnson? Seeing none. You need to be at your chair to be recognized. Senator from Johnson. Okay, I've got Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could either recognize the senator from Douglas, or I would be glad to yield to her.
I will recognize the senator. She's at her desk now. Thank you for your heart. Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the explanation of this concurrent resolution, but I do have a lot of concerns. We heard a lot of testimony during the committee meeting that in fact this system was working well for our constituents. And we heard that it was helpful in terms of not politicizing this, not putting a lot of money in politics. We had some interesting questions about how would judges even find the time to be able to campaign. You know, certainly we'd all like to meet these people, but they would be working on the bench and not able to do the same kind of campaigns that we are. But one of the things, since this did come out of committee, I had concerns about the explanatory statement. I feel that it didn't really reflect well what we were asking the voters to consider. We all know that there's going to be some people who show up and are just reading this explanatory statement and trying to understand what's happening from that. So we also heard that there were some changes made to the bill. They, I think, appropriately struck the words. This is on the first page, line 17. It said, qualified electors shall have the right to elect. And they struck that to just say, qualified electors shall elect. But that same reference to right was not taken out of the explanatory statement. With that, I have an amendment. I've turned it in, and it's number 1704.
Amendment number 1704 will be distributed. We'll pause for a moment. Senator, do you wish to explain your amendment or have it read? Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it would be better if I explain the amendment. It's changing quite a few words in the explanatory statement. So in fact, if you look at this, you'd have to have the bill language beside it to understand. With that, I also realized once I saw this amendment in print that it would be more helpful if I provided a copy to each of the senators that shows what the strikeouts would be and what the additional words would be. I want to apologize because I was trying to do this fairly quickly, so I left out one line, and I was starting to write in some of that words that I left out. But I will go ahead and read this statement as it would explain now the bill. So the explanatory amendment would say this amendment requires the election of the justices of the Kansas Supreme Court. The rest of that explanatory statement stays the same, but it changes. It says a vote for this proposition would, instead of give Kansas citizens the right, it would actually require Kansas citizens, allow Kansas citizens who are qualified electors to elect Kansas Supreme Court justices as provided by law, and then justices will hold offices, and this is the words that I may have to add, for terms of 6 years on the Kansas nominating committee. The Kansas Supreme Court nominating committee would be abolished. It also changes a vote against this proposition by saying a vote against this proposition would continue the current system. And instead of just saying whose membership consists of a majority of lawyers, it would actually describe the membership of that commission by saying whose membership consists of 5 attorneys, 4 of whom represent each congressional district, and 4 non-attorneys who, it may say lawyers, 4 non-lawyers who represent each congressional district. So, Mr. Chair, that's my amendment, and I would stand for questions.
Questions of the senator from Douglas? Senator from Johnson?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the senator's clarifying language. I do have some concerns, however, particularly when you start expanding the explanation. As we know, on a lot of these constitutional amendments, we need to keep it as concise as humanly possible. Where it talks about, on the current bill, it says, whose membership consists of a majority of lawyers, provides the governor a list of 3 individuals to choose from for vacancies. Where this starts expanding it, membership consists of 5 attorneys, 4 of whom represent congressional districts, and 4 non-lawyers. I don't think that additional language is necessary. I think if anybody who is going to vote on this and is interested in doing the right thing would be able to look it up. You can Google search it very easily and find out who the nominating commission is and their makeup. I did it yesterday here on the floor. I wanted to see what the current membership looked like. So I will leave it to the will of the body, but I would say this does add some additional language that may be not necessary on this particular amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Douglas, are you wishing to respond?
I do.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've also taken out some wording, and I think the concern is if you simply say that the Kansas Supreme Court Nominating Committee, whose membership consists of a majority of lawyers, you don't really know. Not everyone who goes into that voting booth is going to be able to Google that. So although whose membership consists of a majority of lawyers is a truthful statement, I think it also could be considered a misleading statement because, in fact, the nominating committee is 4 attorneys, 4 members who are not attorneys, and then the chair that's selected. So I don't think this adds a lot of words, and I do think we should be very careful about explaining our actions and not trying to influence a voter by inappropriate explanations.
On the motion to amend, the chair recognizes Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I look at it, and I appreciate the efforts of the senator from Douglas. I prefer the work product of the committee. I would be in opposition to the amendment. I don't think it has huge consequences, but however, just like in this body, we often see the difference between the legalese of the statute and the plain language of the explanation, whether that's from a member or a conferee in committee. I do believe that I agreed with the committee taking out the right to elect from the Constitution and the legal language. However, I think it's important to keep that in the explanation, because when it comes to plain language, that we want our constituents to understand it's going to be their voice in this decision. So I would be opposed to the amendment. Thank you.
Additional questions on the amendment for the senator from Douglas. Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to support this. The carrier of the original bill said that the people who we want to vote on this are going to know what it means. I think we want all Kansans to be able to vote on this, and we want simple language. If we have to Google something to understand it, there's a flaw in it. When you are in that voting booth, you should be able to read the explanation and make a precise decision based on that language. You shouldn't have to Google something. That means we have failed Kansans. Thank you.
Additional questions on the amendment? Seeing none, Senator from Douglas, you may close on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, if we're asking our citizens to make a change in our Constitution, we should work to be as clear as we can. I did bring this question up during the committee process, but in fact, like many things that have been happening in committees this year, things were rushed. It came on the agenda and was voted on, I believe, the following day that the committee met. Mr. Chair, in the interest of informing our constituents when they vote, I move my amendment.
You have heard the motion to amend Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Motion appears to fail. Motion does fail. We are back on the resolution. Are there additional questions for the Senator from Johnson, Senator from Shawnee, Senator Cluse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the Senator from Johnson would take a few questions.
He'd be delighted.
Thank you. So under the current system, what we have, how is my vote counted for that matter, your vote or anybody's vote, when it comes to the selection of our Supreme Court justices, Kansas Supreme Court justices?
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that question. There is no, you have no vote unless you're an attorney in the state.
Senator from Shawnee.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Mr. Chairman, I have sat on Fed and State for several years as vice chairman. In fact, had the opportunity to sit through quite a number of committees concerning this topic and other election topics. And it seemed like there are at times a theme that has come through, and if the carrier of the bill would take another question, I'd appreciate it.
Go ahead, Senator.
Under the current system, could it actually be said, and this relates back to sitting on those committees, I've heard the verbiage of voter suppression, and come up in a lot of different avenues. So under this current system, could it actually be a form of voter suppression that we hear so much about?
Senator from Johnson.
I think the answer to that is this is a very insulated process. The nominating committee it determines the selection of the Supreme Court justices or the nominations or nominees that are advanced to the governor. And it is a group of people who will deliberate on this and then come up with some names. So the people of Kansas don't really have a way to weigh in on this. These are unelected officials on this nominating committee, and they're making determinations for who will potentially set on the Supreme Court. And therefore, if you get a court, a nominee who takes the bench, we don't have any way to deal with the bad decisions that may come out of that decision process. So in some ways, I suppose you could say that is true. I think mostly it's a very insulated process, which is not transparent, not completely transparent, let's put it that way.
Senator from Shawnee.
So it could be kind of a form of suppression.
Senator from Johnson.
In that respect, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Shawnee, you are recognized now, and you are welcome for being recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a couple other questions, if you will. So as I stand here as an American citizen then, who lives in the state of Kansas, who is furthermore a registered voter of this great state, I was thinking about this morning when I was thinking about this resolution, that I'm able to vote as an individual. If I live in the city for my mayor, city council person. I'm also able to vote for my county commissioner, school board members. I'm also able to vote for my county treasurer, state representatives. Matter of fact, I even got to vote for myself as a state senator. I'm able to vote for my attorney general and the secretary of state. I can even vote for the governor, Mr. Chairman. Along with my congressman, I can vote for, and U.S. senator. So the question would be to the good senator from Johnson, the carrier of the bill. Is that true?
Senator from Johnson.
That you can vote on all of those, yes, it is true. And in some cases in this state, you can even vote on judges, and we certainly vote for retention of judges, but that is a different deal. That is not selecting the judges that sit on the Supreme Court.
Senator from Shawnee.
So in keeping with the current system, though, I cannot vote directly on the Kansas Supreme Court justices. Is that true?
Senator from Senator from Johnson.
That is true. That is true.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I stand today in support of this resolution based on those facts that I should, along with everyone else, have an opportunity to at least give people of Kansas that decision and that choice to vote on our Supreme Court justices in Kansas. Thank you.
Additional questions for the senator from Johnson. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly support Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611 for many reasons. And one theme of the 2024 election that we heard just a few months ago from one of the major political parties was democracy. Democracy. Let the people vote. If we truly believe that, and if they truly believe that, what better than Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611 than allowing democracy, the will of the people? There's one thing I want to point out, though, in this concurrent resolution, because I have an amendment, is that if a state senator in this body runs for a higher office, whether that's governor, Congress, state treasurer, they can remain in that seat regardless of the election occurring concurrently. If they're elected, they'll take that office and they'll resign their Senate seat. Whereas as this is currently written, if a district judge runs for a seat on the Supreme Court, they would have to essentially resign their district court judgeship to be a candidate. And so I have an amendment, and it's 1712.
Amendment 1712 will be distributed. We'll pause for a moment while it is distributed. Senator, do you wish to explain your amendment or have it read?
I'll explain it, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
On page 3, line 23, we just add after campaign, quote, except when such judge is a candidate for the election to a position on the appellate court. So essentially, this prohibits, currently, it prohibits, says no judge shall take part in any political campaign. This just strictly clarifies that if such judge is running for a higher office on the appellate court, they may remain in that judgeship while remaining a candidate for the Supreme Court. Because appellate court is defined in multiple places in our statute, KSA 22-2202, which is our criminal code, as well as KSA 60-2101, and it defines appellate court as means the Supreme Court or Court of Appeals, depending on the context in which the term is used, and the respective jurisdiction of those courts over appeals in criminal cases or civil cases, as provided there by law. And so this amendment will just essentially allow a judge, whether it's in Johnson County or Trigo County, if they are going to be a candidate for the Supreme Court, they may remain on that judgeship so they can pursue that office. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for the senator from Sedgwick on the amendment. Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of this amendment. I think it helps the situation because we don't want a qualified judge hesitant to run in case they would lose that situation or that seat. We want all those qualified judges to be considered, so I'm in support of this amendment.
Additional questions on the proposed amendment for the senator from Sedgwick? Seeing none, Senator from Sedgwick, you may close on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move my amendment.
You have heard the motion to amend Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to carry. Motion does carry. We are back on the resolution. Additional comments, questions for the senator from Johnson. Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions, just some comments. There is no place in our politics in the court. There's no place for politics in the courts. Our justices and judges must be free to rule based on the law. Therefore, the process for their selection must be as far removed from the political arena as possible. Changing the selection process to elect the Supreme Court justices is likely to discourage the very people that we need as a judge, those who see a judge's role as nonpartisan and who adhere to fairly and impartially interpreting and applying the laws. Kansas' current system works. It's a merit-based process. The Kansas Supreme Court Nominating Commission process has stood the test of time. It's proven to be the best system overall for assuring that jurists will be fair and impartial, as well as qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. The Nominating Commission is a nonpartisan group of citizens representing all corners of the state. They vet and select the top 3 most qualified applicants for a Supreme Court vacancy, and they send that to the governor for final selection. In Kansas, we don't have to worry about shadow organizations trying to buy a justice on our Supreme Court. Popular elections, by their nature, create incentives to consider election outcomes instead of questions of the law, and potentially undermine the ability of justices to be impartial and transparent. Justices have a constitutional obligation to consider cases based on facts in the law and not based on who contributed to their campaign or who did not contribute. Our Supreme Court makes well-reasoned opinions on difficult questions regardless of politics. And unlike what the carrier of SCR 1611 stated, one could say that Kansas is even outperforming our peers. Since 1966, when a majority of our court consisted of merit-selected justices, the overall reversal rate across the nation was 77%. But Kansas has done much better than the rest of the nation. Its reversal rate has only been 66% out of 15 cases reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court. So SCR 1611 isn't about fairness. It's not about justice. It's about selling our Supreme Court to the highest bidder. No Kansas should be forced to buy the protection of our highest court. Once we put a for sale sign on the Kansas Supreme Court, we will never get justice back. Out of state interest and national political organizations will simply buy the results that they want and need. Make no mistake that this is not about democracy. This is about school funding. This is about women's reproductive rights. and this is about voting rights. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Clays, Joe Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question for the good senator from Johnson. I believe it's Johnson. I'm sorry. Yes, it is. Are you aware of any other examples where we have handed over to some other organization a power as great as selecting our Supreme Court?
Senator from Johnson.
In Kansas, I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. We did elect the Supreme Court prior to 1958 here in the state of Kansas. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, if he would like to restate and clarify.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Oh, I won't hold up this body anymore. I'm just gonna say that I think that the Supreme Court nominating committee isn't just undemocratic, it's actually anti-democratic by design. When we hand over a substantial control of our judiciary to the Bar Association and these lawyer committees, we create a legal aristocracy that puts the justice system in the very hands of the guild that profits from it. Consider the fundamental conflict here. Attorneys select the judges who will rule on their cases, determine their fees, interpret their laws that they navigate daily. This isn't checks and balances. It's professional self-dealing, and it's just dressed up as expertise. Bar associations are not politically neutral bodies. They represent a professional class with a distinct political leaning, and they do have self-interests that frequently diverge from those of us, the ordinary citizens. This facade of merit, this thin patina, serves as a convenient cover for the inconvenient truth that these systems transfer power from voters to this credentialed elite. When we examine states with this selection criteria, the judiciary increasingly is disconnected from the public's values, their concerns. The legal profession becomes outsized in its influence. It creates a closed feedback loop where lawyers select judges who share their outlook and then reinforce the legal theories that benefit the profession, who then select more like-minded judges. Listen, democracy is not perfect, but the core principle remains sound. Those who live under the law should have a meaningful voice in selecting those who interpret it. This so-called merit selection doesn't supplement democracy, it supplants it. Replacing the ballot box with a bar card is the ultimate source of judicial legitimacy. The solution here isn't to abandon expertise, but to make it properly subordinate to the democratic accountability. Our courts don't belong to the attorneys, they belong to the people, and it's high time we took them back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this carrier of the bill stand for question?
He is standing. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So years ago, not that long ago actually, the Kansas process for selecting appellate court justices was very similar to what the state Supreme Court selection process is now. And wouldn't you consider the state Supreme Court justices a higher step, maybe even more important than the appellate court?
Senator from Johnson.
Well, certainly they are the final say on most of the decisions in this state. Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we did not have any checks and balances over the appellate court. And thankfully, the legislature was able to change that so that there is another set of eyes looking at the appellate court selection process. And I would remind the body a couple years ago that the nominee went through the process, a group of lawyers and others give the governor 3 names. She selects, or 1 name, and she appoints that gentleman to the appellate court process. When this body went to vote on that person, there was not 1 yes vote, not 1. So why wouldn't we want checks and balances and the voters to have the option to select their state Supreme Court justices?
Senator from Johnson.
We would want that, and I think that's where we're heading. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Lynn.
Thank you. And there was a comment made about what this is, about the issues. I would dispute that. In fact, I recommend that you go out and read some of the state Supreme Court decisions, especially the one with the illegals that stole somebody's identity. They were using the identity, and our state Supreme Court said they could not be prosecuted because it was federal, it wasn't state. That meant they could break our state laws and not be prosecuted. Thankfully, our Attorney General took that to the U.S. Supreme Court and got it overturned. I would just recommend that you go out and read some of the opinions, and I would like to have some input as to who our justices are. So I support this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Klemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allowing Kansas to elect their Supreme Court justices empowers citizens to have direct control over an essential aspect of their judicial system. Elections provide a transparent process where educated voters can carefully evaluate candidates' qualifications. By putting this power into the hands of the public, Kansans can foster a judiciary that reflects the will of the community while maintaining fairness and impartiality. Allowing Kansas to vote for their Supreme Court justices will ensure the judiciary is a true representation of the people's voice at its core. This process has roots in the broader democratic principles that shaped Kansas' early governance, reflecting the commitment of citizens' participation at all levels. I stand in favor of supporting this concurrent resolution 1611 as amended.
Additional questions for the Senator from Johnson? Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in strong opposition to SCR 1611 because I really believe it would bring in a raft of dark money, backroom deals, and politics into our court that would really have the effect of undermining public confidence in the judiciary. If I could, I want to direct the body's attention to an article from Axios that I had distributed that's on your desk, because I really think that we need to ask ourselves the fundamental question of whether what we're seeing in states like Wisconsin, Louisiana, other states, if we really want to unleash a torrent of dark and special interest money into these judicial elections, Mr. Chair, this would be something the likes of which Kansas has never seen. I'll go back to Wisconsin, but in Louisiana, in 2016, a state Supreme Court election, more than half of the campaign funds came from outside groups, with dark money groups donating millions of dollars. There's been points made by my colleagues today that have said, things about this is going to give the voice to the people. I think that the reality, when you look at it, Mr. Chair, is that the voice of the people is going to be simply just drowned out by dark money and special interest money flooding these elections. In Louisiana, they will literally have lawyers who will be in court and have a hearing before a judge, and then they will go across the street to the attorney's office and they will have a fundraiser for that attorney that they've just appeared before. Point was made by another colleague that the Bar Association role in the Supreme Court nominating commission creates a conflict. You have not seen anything like the kind of conflicts that would be created if we had judicial elections, when we have attorneys, business organizations, corporations, PACs, special interests, dark money flowing into our judicial elections. You have not seen anything like it. If you look at in West Virginia in 2009, there was a mining company that had a case in front of the state Supreme Court. They basically just bankrolled the campaign of a candidate for the Supreme Court to the tune of millions of dollars. If you look at this article that I sent, think about this. So in this year, we're going to be electing a governor in Virginia and a governor in New Jersey. And it says, article says, why this year's hottest election is a Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. So Wisconsin's going to be electing a justice on April 1st. In 2013, over $51 million in dark money was spent on a judicial election in that state. Think about that. One of the candidates, because this is the natural outgrowth of what's going to happen, one of these candidates who's supposed to then later be an impartial justice on the state Supreme Court, took public positions on things like abortion and redistricting that ended up leading to complaints which were dismissed by the Wisconsin Judicial Election Commission. As of 2018, 1/3 of all elected judges from across the U.S. have run in at least one race that cost over $1 million. So let's go look closer at this. Wisconsin has money pouring in right now from Elon Musk and George Soros. Is that what we want here in the state of Kansas? We're on pace to surpass the $51 million spent just 2 years ago. We're already over $30 million in money being spent. This article talks about one PAC that spent over $3 million on advertising. Talks about a donation from George Soros of $1 million. Talks about the Wisconsin Democratic Party transferring $2 million to a candidate's campaign account. It talks about another billionaire donating $500,000, another billionaire donating $250,000. And what the article says is the outside spending is, quote, another illustration of how these have transformed from pretty quiet local races to nationalized elections that in some ways feel just like a high-stakes U.S. Senate race. These outside donations, according to the article, have raised questions about possible conflicts of interest and whether these judicial candidates would step aside if they were to hear a case involving a donor. So I just really want to caution the body of going down this road, because I think if you think that there are problems with conflicts, with the Bar Association having too much power, you haven't seen anything yet. I mean, I think if this were to be enacted, one of the things I do is, often will counsel clients about trying to find and select a lawyer. I think one of the things that people like me would have to do when you talk to a client about their selection of a lawyer is you would have to tell them, I think you need to find a lawyer who's contributed to the justices. And I think you need to make sure that your lawyer hasn't contributed to their opponents. Is that, again, really what we want is being best for Kansas? A couple other points I want to address. This idea that somehow what we're doing in Kansas by having merit-based selection is something uncommon. It's simply not true. It's actually, Mr. Chair, the most common method of selecting state-level justices. 34 states plus the District of Columbia use some form of a nominating commission. We've heard some complaints about the Bar Association, the attorneys have too much power, that there are too many non-attorney members. Again, not uncommon. 14 states, including Kansas, use a system that has both merit selection and retention races and has attorneys involved in the nominating commission. Actually, we'd be a real outlier if we were Kansas, if we adopted this, because the real outlier actually is partisan elections, which is what this bill proposes. Only 7 states have partisan judicial elections. So you want to talk about outlier, you want to talk about deviating from the mean, that's actually exactly what this SCR would have us doing. We would also be an outlier in that no state that has adopted merit selection has replaced it with direct election of justices. It was alluded to by a couple colleagues that, our current Supreme Court justices aren't accountable, that somehow it's voter suppression that people aren't able to directly elect their justices. I think what we're forgetting is that we do have retention elections. So when a justice is appointed to the Supreme Court, they have to stand for a retention election in the first general election after they are put on the court, and then in another retention election every 6 years thereafter. So if a justice gets out of line, if a justice deviates too far from public opinion, they can just not be retained. It's a straightforward, simple process. It's a straightforward up or down vote. I want to make the point that, not all rulings are going to be popular. If you're like me, you've been frustrated with some of the Supreme Court's recent rulings. But that doesn't mean that because you disagree with a ruling that the Supreme Court was engaged in judicial activism. It doesn't mean that the merit selection process isn't working. I will tell you this, I will go to my grave believing that the Kansas Supreme Court got it completely wrong in 2022 in the redistricting case. I believe that the Supreme Court got it wrong again this summer. Totally missed the mark when they said that there's not a fundamental right to vote. But if you look at that redistricting case, you had 2 justices who were appointed by Governor Kelly who were in the majority upholding the Republican-drawn maps. That shows you that these justices are making decisions on the merits and what they perceive as following the law and going where they believe that law leads them and adopting that conclusion, even when it's contrary to the party of the governor who nominated them. The structure, I just want to emphasize the structure of how our legal system works. It means fundamentally the Supreme Court only decides the hardest, toughest questions. Think about it this way. Most disputes get resolved by the parties before a lawsuit's even filed. Over 90% get settled at the trial court level. The few cases that are tried and then are appealed are mostly resolved by the Court of Appeals. So the slim number of cases that make it to the Supreme Court, they're those cases where there aren't clear, obvious answers. And these are difficult, close calls, which is why you see qualified and experienced justices disagreeing with each other. That's why you see issuing split opinions. And I just want to talk, I want to end by making 2 final points. One, about the practical implications of what it is that we're considering today. One is, I just say this speaking as a member of the bar and somebody who's put myself up for running for public office. The reality is that in a system where we are electing our judges, the best lawyers aren't going to run. The best attorneys, the smartest people that we really want deciding the toughest legal issues, the 100 or so cases that get decided, those folks are simply going to not want to stand up to an 18-month statewide campaign where tens of millions of dollars is going to be spent against them, where they're going to be caricatured, where they're going to be maligned. It simply is the case that this is going to leave us with a subpar group of justices, because the best folks, the most capable folks, the most qualified, the most experienced folks, the folks with the best judicial temperament simply will find this process so unappealing that they won't step up. I would remind the body, we tend to focus on the few really politically charged cases. Of the 100 or so cases decided every year, most of them are just really narrow cases about a technical issue of statutory interpretation. And they're highly technical. And they're the cases we really want our best legal minds. And I'll just close by saying, this absolutely is going to hurt rural Kansas. If we adopted this, the result is that you're going to have a court full of wealthy, well-connected lawyers from Johnson County and Wichita, and very few, if any, justices from rural Kansas. Because it's those folks from those population centers, those are the ones that are going to have the networks, they're going to have the political connections required to fund these multi-million-dollar campaigns that we're going to unleash. And that would be really unfortunate, frankly, because our court is best served by having geographic diversity. Right now, we've got justices on the Supreme Court from Scott City, from Smith Center, from Goodland. That absolutely will not happen under this system if we were to adopt this and go down this road. So I would ask us, let's not hang a for sale sign on the Kansas Judicial Center building. I would ask that you join me in voting no on SCR 1611. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Additional questions for the senator from Johnson? There is a glow behind you, Senator from Butler. I don't know if it's your halo or if it's just the lines not being shut. Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try to actually be brief, but I'm a little taken aback by the fear of the voters. Right? I mean, I don't understand. It feels like it's being proposed that we somehow have a duty to protect people against their own choices as if they're too dumb to make them. I would contend that sometimes we get a subpar senator, right? So elections do have consequences, right? It's what it is. But to say that this is somehow injecting politics, make no mistakes, politics is in it. It's just behind the curtain. It's part of the elite society of super voters, of which, by the way, in this body, I think I count 3. 3 of us are super voters. And so they're contending that the 37 of the rest of us aren't bright enough to make that decision. This is about giving that decision to the people. It is the highest court in our state. And most people have no voice. None. The darkness is just cheaper. It doesn't take millions, it just takes a little, because you only got to influence the secret society. But it's every bit there. So I'm saying that this vote isn't just to say status quo. It is status quo, but it's saying my constituents should not have a voice. Only the elite. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Additional questions for the senator from Johnson? Seeing none. Senator from Johnson, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the robust debate. I want to make a number of points here, and I don't want to belabor this, but I think it's important for those who are listening in to understand the reasoning behind what we are doing. I heard the comment that we should keep politics out of the realm of selecting the Supreme Court. There is no doubt there is politics in this. Just what they call a double play is politics, where a Supreme Court justice that currently sits on the court can time their retirement based on when a governor is going to be in that office that will replace them with someone who has a like mind, who has similar ideology. Just that alone is politics. That's playing politics. Politics, you read, one of the senators brought up the fact you should read these Supreme Court decisions. I absolutely agree. There was one decision recently where one of the justices justified his opinion based on a vote of the people of Kansas. A pollster does that. A Supreme Court justice has to make a decision based on the Constitution. So there are absolutely politics involved in this. We heard about the merit-based system. That's marketing. That has nothing to do, the people who have the system and defend the system right now call it the merit-based system. We call Philadelphia the city of brotherly love, but they throw snowballs at Santa Claus. So you can call it whatever you'd like, but merit-based system is nothing more than a marketing ploy to maintain the current system. I heard about the Supreme Court justices or a justice wanting to run for that position, not having time. The Supreme Court docket runs about 6 to 7 weeks. They take summers off. All of us who ran for the Senate spent the entire summer. I spent the entire summer walking door to door. I started in April. I didn't finish until the general election. I went for months. I had to justify to my voters that I was the right person. I heard about money, too much money in this. Well, right now, there's never, in the Missouri model, the way this is done, there's never been a justice not retained. Why is that? Well, there's no other name on the ballot, and the people don't even know how these people rule. They don't take the time. If we elect our judges, yes, there will be a lot of money involved. There will be a lot of politics involved. There will be a lot of advertising. But one, it increases the interest from the public in those elections. It's going to open up the door to those types of decisions and allow our voters to seek out the information they need to make a good decision. So rather than showing up at the poll at the last minute and say, oh gosh, I don't know who this guy is, they're gonna know. They'll absolutely know who that person is. The article from Axios, you're gonna have people on both sides trying to push this. Yes, absolutely. But again, the people of Kansas, we have to give them the credit to make good decisions. The federal model, that was discussed a little bit. In the past, I've thought about, well, whether or not the federal model would be the right thing to do. And at the federal level, I do think it makes sense. The senators who decide there have a staff, a staff who can vet the nominees, who can look into their voting records in the lower courts, who can have the time to make good, solid questions. If we did the federal model here and attempted to do that, they come into our offices, we ask them a series of questions in just a few minutes and hope that the nominee is giving us an honest answer. And so we're making a gut decision, not a well-vetted decision. So I've come around to think that this election process is the right way to do it. Not that the nominating commission is any better. If you look at some of the questions from the nominating commission in our current situation, let me read in the 20-minute interview of, in the recent years, it asked, any insight into bridging divides between branches? These are actual questions of Supreme Court nominees. What lesson do you hope your kids have learned from you? Describe your research and writing skills. Why would being younger than other applicants be beneficial to the Supreme Court? And I see you have ballet experience. Will they be a Supreme Court of Kansas ballet show at some point? I wouldn't even ask that question. So the election at least allows for transparency and allows the voice of the people to be heard. Partisan versus nonpartisan, I heard that discussed. There are a number of states that have nonpartisan elections. As you can see in this particular SCR, that has not yet to be determined. It's as provided by law. If we determine they are to be nonpartisan elections, they'll be nonpartisan elections. In many cases, the Supreme Court overturns the will of the legislature based on nothing more than whim. I could go on and on. There's all sorts of things. I think people have probably made up their mind. But the bottom line is this is a transparency issue. This is getting to the point we have to have a change in this system. The decisions of our current Supreme Court, with the exception of one of the justices, quite frequently are not constitutionally based. And with that, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and report SCR 1611 as amended favorably for adoption.
You have heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to pass. Motion does pass. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Blasey, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders, with Senator Peck in the chair. Recommended SCR 1611 be amended by the adoption of the committee report, be it further amended on motion of Senator Blasey, and the resolution be adopted as amended.
Chair recognizes Senator Montgomery, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move adoption of the committee report.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Are there announcements? Before announcements, we're going to refer back to that order of business, introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 290 by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act making and concerning appropriations for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 for the State Historical Society to issue a scope statement, plan to work to be accomplished, and issue a request for proposals for a master plan for the Quindaro Ruins Archaeological Park in Wyandotte County, Kansas, and implement such master plan.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 290. Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Local Government, Transparency, and Ethics recommends Senate Bill 194 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Commerce recommends House Bill 2092 be passed and because the committee is of the opinion that the bills of a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Mr. President, the Committee on Commerce recommends House Bill 2117 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion that the bills of a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Mr. President, the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance recommends House Bill 2043 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2155 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2242 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2347 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2062 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2031 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2124 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2289 be amended and the bill be passed as amended.
Now are there announcements? The chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The new senators will meet tomorrow morning at 7:30, and anyone is invited in room 218. We will be reviewing or having presentations on CAN Focus and KLIS. 7:30 a.m., room 218.
Chair recognizes Senator from Lyons, Senator Argobright.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Those senators giving out Master Teacher Awards tomorrow, if you would please see me either right after the meeting, please. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from Sedgwick, Majority Leader Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Tomorrow, the Senate is going on general orders. We have two bills above the line, Senate Bill 237 and Senate Bill 194. Tomorrow, the Senate will vote emergency final action on those measures so we can head home. We will also be voting on the confirmation of Stephen Anderson as Inspector General. And with that, Mr. Vice President, the Senate Republicans will caucus in 548 South immediately upon adjournment, and I yield to the Senator from Douglas.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Senate Democrats will caucus at noon tomorrow in room 287 North. I yield back to the Senator from Sedgwick.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Mr. Vice President, I move the Senate adjourn until 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, March 6th, 2025.
For the motion, all in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We're adjourned.